Hello, we're live with the Rotoworld Fantasy Baseball Q&A. I'm joined today, special guest, Chris Clegg. Chris, say hi to the people and give a little introduction. I mean, you're one of my favorite, prospect writers, but you've really kind of grown what you do over the last couple of years. So just kind of let the people know, where they can read your work and what you specialize in.
Yeah, sure. Well, I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to answering all the listener questions. Going to be a good time for sure. But yeah, my name is Chris Clegg. You can find me on Twitter at RotoClegg, Clegg. My work's at thedynastydugout.com, which is a site that I founded about a year ago or 2 years ago, actually. Just covering prospects, dynasty, all that good stuff. But kind of across the board coverage as well. So also write for Rotoballer. You can find me on the Toolshed Pod as well with Eric Cross.
Yeah, great stuff. Obviously, a lot of people we have in common at Rotoballer. It's a great site. Happy that you're over there, and obviously the Dynasty Dugout. One of the few additional things that I'm subscribing to. It's really great content. So you don't have to only ask us prospect questions because Chris is here. But if you do have prospect questions, this is a great resource to ask. So make sure you can hit us up in the YouTube comments. If you're watching this on Twitch right now, you can hit us up there as well. Also, any questions you can ask us on Twitter while we're recording. We'll try to get to as many of those as possible in about 45 minutes that we're on here. I did want to ask you while we're here, before we get to the specific questions, the Cubs promoted their top pitching prospect, Kade Horton, to AAA today. So not a big league promotion, but promoted to AAA. What are your thoughts on Kade Horton as a prospect, and what do you think this promotion maybe means for his timeline to the pros?
Yeah, so Horton's quite advanced as an arm. I think he's arguably in the top 3 of pitching prospects. You have Skeens, you've got Job, and you have Horton in that top tier, for me at least. With Horton, stellar arm, former two-way guy at Oklahoma who missed a lot of time in college due to Tommy John. But when he came back his junior year of college, he just went on an absolute tear. College World Series, showed some nasty stuff, and it earned him a spot as the 7th overall pick in 2022. And Horton has continued to develop since then. Obviously, we've seen what he's done so far last year's first full pro season, which was rather stellar. You're looking at a mid-90s fastball, gets up near triple digits. I think he's touched 99, but usually sits in that 94 to 97 range. Gets a ton of swings and misses at the top of the zone with that four-seamer. Slider is just a wipeout pitch. It's a mid-80s slider. It has nice depth, good sweeping action. He's consistently 10-plus inches of sweep on that with that depth. And he throws a curveball as well that has the more vertical movement profile. He did add a changeup last year. And if you look at the progress from last season, from early part of the year to later part of the year, he was really focusing on developing that split change. He changed the grip completely in season. And you can kind of see when he started getting a feel for it and the results started coming. Horton's an interesting one because and this is why it's so tough to evaluate pitching prospects in general, or all prospects, because they're all working on things. This was the case last year where the Cubs were at the lower levels were specifically making him throw that pitch at certain counts in the strike, like consistently. And so every time, like every second pitch, he was throwing that changeup just because it was a work in progress kind of thing. But it is 4 above average pitches at this point. I think there's really good like SP2 upside, heavy strike thrower. I think he threw strikes at a rate of 66% last year for the full season. And so far this year, he's been stellar in AA, 1.10 ERA in 16 innings, which is rather good. 18 strikeouts to just 2 walks so far. And I think people kind of had questions like Horton was not in big league spring training with the team. Everybody's like, well, why not?
Why?
Yeah. The Cubs just wanted to manage his innings here. And I think that you're kind of seeing this now as he is going to be in AAA. I don't think they rush him. They're still kind of going to manage the innings in AAA. I think the Cubs want him for that stretch run at the end of the year when he still has innings and he can go. I mean, this is a team that's leading the division right now in the NL Central, half a game up on the Brewers. Horton steps into this rotation and immediately makes a huge impact upon a rival. You have Shota Imanaga, but after that, I mean, there's some question marks in this rotation.
And
So
we know we're getting Justin Steele back in the coming weeks as well, which will fill some of the gaps that has been left by, obviously now like Hayden Wesneski's filling in. Even if you are saying, okay, what's going to happen with Ben Brown? Like we get Steele in. So it seems like maybe you're expecting Horton, July-ish, maybe August feels like potentially when we might see him in the majors.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. Preseason, I was thinking like the August kind of promotion, kind of let him go down the stretch, keep him in that range where he doesn't eclipse prospect eligibility, kind of have him enter 2025 like eligible for the rookie of the year. But considering he's in AAA now, I think that timeline could be, accelerate a little bit. I think July, anytime after the All-Star break might be reasonable. I think a lot depends on what they do. The trade deadline, where they are in the standings. Obviously, this is a contending team, and this is an arm that helps them out in that scenario. So, yeah, I think you definitely could see him second half of the season, and I think that we'll really see what he's made of in AAA this year. Obviously, the stuff's really good. I think Horton's an absolute stud.
Certainly a name to watch, and now that he's one step closer, everybody should keep an eye on what's happening in Chicago, if there are any additional injuries and stuff like that. We're going to get to our questions now. We've got a lot coming in, so make sure, again, you can ask us any of these questions on YouTube, on Twitch as well. The first question is a great question, which I think a lot of people have. Dave asked, what was the point of promoting Heston Kjerstad if he never plays? And I think this is the gift and the curse of the Orioles having a loaded farm system is, when the promotion happened, we talked about it on our podcast, and we just said there's not really an avenue. The only avenue is to replace Ryan O'Hearn, and Ryan O'Hearn is playing really well and doing what they want him to do. As the roster is currently constructed, provided there are no more injuries, I don't think there's a path for Heston Kjerstad to play. My gut is that he was called up because they didn't really know for sure how Ryan Mountcastle's knee was going to respond to the injury. And it's a little bit of like, we have the bat, why not call him up and see? But I don't think he's long for the major league roster.
Yeah, it's very disappointing, obviously, to see him sit the bench. And it's weird, too, because a player of this talent level that's performing at this high of a level, you want them playing, whether it's in AAA, whether it's in the majors. Obviously, we'd love to see him on the field in Baltimore, but I think that lineup just being as loaded as it was, like that was the path to playing time you mentioned, was Ryan Mountcastle. And he came back a day after Kjerstad was called up. Kjerstad was called up. He played last Tuesday. That was the last time he started a game, was last Tuesday, which is crazy. But that was the scenario. Mountcastle was back. You're not going to sit in those outfielders at this point. I mean, Kowser's playing good. You obviously have Cedric Mullins, who's on a tear so far, and Anthony Santander has been much better as of the last couple of weeks too. So there's just not that avenue. And unfortunately, O'Hearn's playing well. Mountcastle's playing well. It's just there's no spot. So I think, right now he's wasting away. You'd rather see him in AAA playing than sitting on the bench in the majors. But I agree. Why call him up? I think it was just, okay, is Mountcastle going to hit the IL? And if Mountcastle had hit the IL, okay, Kjerstad steps right in because he can play first base or DH, and that would have been the fit.
Yeah, it is unfortunate to see, but again, I think his time will come. But it's going to take an injury or a move. The other name that's being discussed a lot right now is Joey Loperfido. Obviously, the rumors are he is getting called up today. There are some concerns about the strikeout rate, but we were in a conversation on Twitter. I know, Beck, who does a lot of good work for you, has written about this. The idea that the strikeout rate for Loperfido is possibly not as concerning as it might seem on the surface because he's not really chasing out of the zone. It seems like a hitter who's selling out for a little bit more power, which has led to that massive power burst we've seen this year, but also led to some more swings and misses in the zone. What are your expectations for Loperfido now that he's up? Because it seems like the first base job could be his if he plays, because Jose Abreu may finally be done.
Yeah. Well, the Astros have got a complete zero out of Abreu. So, yeah, the nice thing about Loperfido is he's very versatile. I mean, he plays first base, he plays second base, he can play any of the three outfield spots, but most likely a corner. So, I think the strikeout rate is a fair question because you look on the surface and yeah, he's 30.3% on the season. That number has actually trended in the right direction all season, though. You look early in the year, and he had a 6 strikeout game very early on, the 4th game of the year, 6 strikeouts. And that massively inflated that number. Now, you look at the game log, and he's striking out at least once pretty much every game. So there are strikeouts there. But I do think that there's some effects from the ABS here with there's more called strikes because the AAA zone is bigger this year than it has been in the past. So I think that naturally has an effect. But I also think Loperfido makes enough contact to where, okay, he's going to be fine because he can make contact in the zone. He's running fine rates there. He's running a fine overall contact rate too. And it's not like a wow you type of contact rate, but it's serviceable. It's average,
Right.
Contact. He's going to strike out in the majors. That's part of the profile. But when you get the power, when you get the speed, I don't think he's going to strike out too much where it's like, okay, this guy is just going to come up and he's immediately going to get sent back down after a couple of weeks of just completely struggling, because we're looking like running his rolling contact rates. I mean, 85% in zone, like 76% overall, like that'll play in AAA in my opinion. And yeah, he's going to see a bit of a hit in the majors, but those numbers are fine. So I'm not overly worried about the strikeouts personally.
Good. Yeah. And the second part of this question is, who would you rather have, him or Vaughn Grissom in an OPS league? In an OPS league, I don't think it's particularly close. I'd rather have Loperfido. I do like Vaughn Grissom. I think he should be added in most places because he's going to be back up this week and he's going to play every day at second base for the Red Sox. But Vaughn Grissom to me is a solid batting average asset who's going to get a boost playing at Fenway. He'll chip in some homers, he'll chip in some steals, but he's not really going to move the needle there. And even though the lineup still has some good hitters, obviously without Casas and Story in there, there's a little bit less depth, which means a little bit less runs, RBIs, etc. So I think Loperfido's the easy answer between those two.
I would wholeheartedly agree. And I like Grissom too. I think what you mentioned is completely fair. But with Loperfido, I mean, we're talking about somebody that hit 27 homers last year and stole, or 25 and then stole 27 bases. So yeah, I mean, all the ingredients are there for him to be a solid power speed asset. And we've seen the power obviously this year. So Loperfido would be my pick.
A former prospect. The question is Michael Busch a drop or a hold in a 10-team league? Michael Garcia is on the waiver wire. I kind of think, first of all, to me, it depends on what you're looking for, right? I mean, if you need power, Busch is obviously the superior option there. He's still running a 16.4% barrel rate right now. The strikeout rate is elevated, but he's hitting 270 because the walk rate is still fine. I think Michael Garcia is a better option if you need speed, right? I think Michael Garcia also is somebody who is probably going to end the year with a better batting average, I believe, than Michael Busch. I know Michael Garcia had that cold spell. But I think he's a better batting average and speed target, and Busch is a better power target. And they're both certainly 10-team viable. I just think it depends on your needs.
I would agree wholeheartedly. I think that it's close enough for me where it's just needs based. And, I think that everybody wants to hit the panic button on Michael Busch, but this is exactly kind of who he's always been, a pretty streaky hitter, but one that makes a ton of contact in the zone. I mean, he's running at 87.5% zone contact rate right now, which is really, really good. So I think he's just going to go through spells because in some ways he does take some strikes. And I know the swing rate's like about average, but he's not swinging and missing a ton. The swinging strike rate is fine. So I think Busch is just going to go through spells where he's going to have some ups and downs, but he still probably hits 25 homers at the end of the year. If you want the speed, take Garcia.
Yep. Fully agree there. We got a question coming in from Twitch, which is when will Vlad Guerrero Jr. start hitting? And it's an interesting question because like he is hitting in certain respects. Like if you're looking at it, the strikeout rate is higher than we've seen in the past, but the swinging strike rate is not meaningfully higher. It's 0.4% higher. So he's not swinging and missing any more than he was before. His contact rate is just 2% down from last year. That's not really anything meaningful at this part. Zone contact rate is just 1% down. The called strike rate is up a little bit, which I think might be leading a little bit of that passivity might be leading to an elevated strikeout rate, despite not having a lot of swinging strikes. And he is swinging and missing less out of the zone, but fouling off more pitches, which I think is leading to some deeper counts. For me, like there's nothing that jumps out that it's like this is a vastly different hitter. The barrel rate is still 10.5%. His pull rate is down and his ground ball rate is up. And to me, I think that leads into like, why is the batting average not there? Why is the power not there? And it's the same concerns that we've had about him for years. And to be fair, like I don't think I'm not saying he's a 230 hitter, right? The batting average will come up. He's going to get over 20 home runs this year, but he hits the ball on the ground. That's what he does. That's what he has always done. And I understand he had that spike year in 2021 when everybody was hitting home runs and he was also playing in 2 different minor league ballparks. But I don't think this is a guy that's like a 35 homer bat. And I think the batting average will be there, but I think we need to maybe recalibrate how we view him still.
Yeah, Vlad, I think, is a really good player. I don't think Vlad's an elite player just because of what you mentioned. His sweet spot rate is one of the lowest in all of baseball at 25%. And that's basically looking at ideal launch angle. The ground balls you mentioned is a fair point. And I think that guys just struggle to change their launch angle. You have to have a drastic swing change in order to do that. And for Vlad, I'm just afraid he's always going to hit the ball on the ground. And I know you look at the launch angles, you're like, all right, he was 10.5 degrees last year and 9.4 this year, which is why I just don't think average launch angle is that useful because the ground ball rates are still really high. He's got a lot of pop-ups mixed in there too, which factor in and make that launch angle look pretty respectable. Yeah, Vlad hits the ball hard, but he hits the ball hard on the ground pretty often. And I'm just afraid that that's going to hamper him for a lot of his career unless that there's a drastic swing change, in which case does it affect other things? And I think that you have to ask that question. But yeah, I think Vlad, he gave you 25 homers. He gave you 26 last year. So, he probably comes around to getting 25 homers. Where's the batting average settle? We'll see. Depends on how many line drives he can hit, honestly, if he gets the ball a little more in the air. But I just think the expectation, as you said, needs to be tempered a little bit rather than thinking that he can be an elite hitter.
Yeah. I'm going to modify this question a little bit. Instead of asking you how you would rank these ads in a head-to-head points league, I think this is just an interesting question to get into, like where Loperfido kind of fits in. Again, points leagues here, so we're talking about more points for power, obviously home runs, stolen bases as well. So like Loperfido's profile when matched up against a guy like Adele, who's a former prospect who's now getting additional playing time and starting to make good on that, or somebody like Adames, Willie Adames, shortstop for the Brewers, who we know is a power bat. We've seen him be a strong regular for a while, or even somebody like Brent Rooker, who we know has contact issues but also has like elite power. Do you feel like Loperfido fits in this group? Is he above this group? How would you kind of rank him, or where do you think his vibe is compared to these guys?
So personally, I would say it's like Adames at the top for me. The consistency. He's got plenty of major league at bats. Like we know what he can do, and we know what to expect from him. So I would say Adames is comfortably at the top, and then I would say it's like Loperfido, then Adele, because while Adele is surging, there's still chase and there's still a lot of whiffs. I know his contact rate is up like 10 percentage points from previous years, but it's still not good. So I still have a little bit of concern about Adele. Like, does it just come crashing down? So I would say for me, it's looking like Adames, and then it's kind of a teardrop to Loperfido and Adele, then followed by Nevin and Rooker. So those guys kind of fall in the bottom tier for me. But yeah, Loperfido comfortably in that 2 spot, I think.
Yeah, nice. I think it's definitely a bat that's worth adding in most leagues, and kind of keeping with bats that should be added in most leagues. I'm recording a video tomorrow I had to write the script for, and my weekly ad drop hold. And I'm shocked that Andy Pages has not added in more leagues. He's only 24% rostered in Yahoo formats right now. And I know there's like a lot of depth of like what type of leagues those are, but this is a guy who has played every game since being called up by the Dodgers. He's hitting essentially 300, 2 home runs, 10 runs scored, 8 RBIs. I know he hasn't drawn a walk yet at all, but like that's not his profile. His profile in the minors was a high walk rate guy. He's just being challenged because he's a rookie and pitchers are saying, can you hit this? And so he's just hitting it rather than drawing walks. Do you feel like Pages is for real? Like, is he up in this Dodgers lineup for the season?
I think so. I think that they've tipped their hand as far as how they value him. And I said that pretty early on when he was playing for every day for the first 3 or 4 games, because we've seen the Dodgers promote guys in the past and not play them regularly.
Mm-hmm.
But Pages has, as you mentioned, he's played every day and he's produced. And all he's done in the minors as well is produce. I think that if he had not got, like, he was already a top 50 prospect for me prior to the year, but if he had not gotten hurt last year, I think that probably would have been consistent, like universal, maybe even higher, like top 25, because prior to 2023, he cut 25 pounds. He was much more athletic and he improved the contact skills significantly. He ran a 78% overall contact rate last season before the injury, and the athleticism was there with obviously the big power that he had. He had a torn labrum, and then to come back this year from a torn labrum and to look like he has is great. He's fully healthy. He's going to give you big time power. He just lifts the ball easily. You know, I think the EVs are above average to plus, but with the launch angle and the way he hits the ball, he can get to 30 home runs. Not to mention that, you know, in the past he has put up good OBPs. I know you mentioned right now there's not been many walks, but I don't care because he's putting so many balls in play. I mean, he's making things happen. So I'm not overly concerned about the walk rate for a young rookie that's come up and is making a ton of contact and making things happen. So no, he's for real and he's here to stay.
Boom. You heard it here. And I will say it again tomorrow on this video. A guy that I'm less convinced about. So this is another kind of like Michael Busch segue question. I assume the Santana hero is Carlos Santana. These all appear to be first base options. Carlos Santana, Anthony Rizzo, Spencer Torkelson, and Michael Busch. Rest of season in a points league. I'm at the point where I might actually consider Michael Busch over Torkelson. I'm a little concerned about Torkelson right now. He's been challenged a lot by inside fastballs more than he was last year. It's leading to more pop-ups. He's not turning around on those pitches like we maybe thought, given his plus raw power. To me, it's between those two guys here, Santana and Rizzo. It's like, hey, it's great they're going to run some hot weeks. They're certainly usable in certain formats, but I'm still taking the upside on a Torkelson or a Busch. I think I lean towards Michael Busch right now. I don't know if you think that's crazy.
No, I mean, just the way things are running for Torkelson, like it just had, like you mentioned, it has not looked good at all. There's been a lot of regression across the board in a lot of areas too. And I know you kind of look at the heat map, like you said, and he can't get around on these inside pitches. Ultimately, it's leading to a lot of flares and pop-ups. And I think he rebounds. I really do believe that, but I don't think it's crazy at all to consider Michael Busch over him at the moment. Just considering Busch is hitting for power, and he's in a better stadium for power too,
and a better lineup too for counting stats too.
Yeah, I mean, Detroit is not a good hitter's park at all. I know Torque hit 31 last year, but could he get back to that? The way things are looking right now, I don't think so. So yeah, I do think Torkelson's going to be fine long term, but in the shorter term, next couple months, I do think it's Busch.
Yeah, which is wild to say, but that also tells you a little bit of how valuable Michael Busch still remains despite a little bit of a cold stretch. I was looking into this on the fly. The question from TM is, do you see anything wrong with Randy Arozarena? Obviously acknowledging what we're going to talk about here is a little bit of like looking at data and trying to make some, take some conclusions from that without having to like really study what's going on with him. To me, it appears to be a little bit of a swing plane issue, whether it's an intended launch angle increase or not. His launch angle is up from years past. And that's leading to a pretty big spike in pop-up rate. He's got a 9% increase in pop-up rate. And that has really seen like both his fly ball rate and ground ball rate are up. The line drive rate has kind of been what's sunk. And to me, like that's a little bit of a swing plane, right? We're getting under things, we're popping them up instead of driving them to the outfield. Interestingly, it might be like it might suggest that his swing is long because he's also not pulling more. He's hitting more to opposite field. So and up the middle. So if I'm seeing, okay, a guy is getting under the ball, but he's not getting under the ball to the pull side, he's getting under it to middle or middle away. That to me is suggesting a little bit of like maybe a little length in the swing or a little loop in the swing. There's just something where his timing is off on it. He's not like chasing outside of the zone meaningfully different. His zone contact is down. And that's led to increased swinging strike rates in the zone. So for me, it doesn't appear to be anything approach related. It appears to be something swing related. And I think that's fixable more than something where, like, oh, he's chasing too much and pitchers are taking advantage of a certain thing. I also see that, Pitcher List has a great stat where you can look at like where a guy is being pitched. And he's being pitched inside more than he was last year. It's actually tied for the most he's been pitched inside in his career. And so that would also make sense if you have a long swing and you're being pitched inside. He's not able to turn on things. He's getting jammed a little bit, leading to pop-ups, flares, etc. That's my takeaway. I don't know if you've seen anything that makes you come to a different conclusion.
Yeah, there's something going on here. I don't know if he's playing through something, and I don't want to assume that by any means, but there's been some struggles even dating back to, towards the end of last season where he just hasn't looked like himself. And I think that's obviously there's been some not great results. The batting average is tanked. The OBP's tanked, not aiming for any sort of power at all. And we're talking about somebody that had been consistent 2020 guy. Like you could rely on Arozarena for 2020 for the last 3 seasons. And then to see this is kind of interesting. And I do think he's getting pitched a little differently, as you mentioned, just kind of looking at that and where he's getting thrown is obviously pretty notable here. And maybe there is some kind of issue within the swing, but the results aren't good. I do think that there is reason to be concerned here unless he just figures something out pretty quickly, because the contact rate is down about 5 percentage points overall. And in the zone is horrifically bad. Like he's dropped like 8 percentage points in the zone, which is very notable and something that needs to improve rather quickly. So, yeah, I think it's fair to be a little bit concerned with Arozarena at this point.
Yeah, I could see maybe moving him to your bench for a little bit if you've got somebody that's hitting the ball well. I certainly wouldn't be trying to drop him yet. And I don't know that I'd be trying to trade him because I don't know if you're going to get value. If you get fair value, fine, because there are some concerning trends here. But I wouldn't like panic and try to get rid of him if you're not getting anything valuable there. We're going to do one more hitter question, and then we've got a bunch of pitcher questions coming in. I didn't know if you had heard anything about this. Somebody saw a rumor from a Canadian reporter that Tyler Black could be getting called up. I'm curious if you had heard anything about that.
No, I don't have any intel that he's getting the call. It makes sense logically with how hot he has been that he could be getting a call. He's one that I thought could break camp with the team. And obviously they went out and acquired Rhys Hoskins. They have Jake Bauers as well. But, at some point, this Jake Bauers experiment probably comes to an end. He is, kind of slowing down a bit. I know he was good early on, but he's been very bad the last few weeks. Strikeout rate's up to 38% now, so it's not good. And Black is, rather limited defensively. When they say he's going down to work on defense, they mean it, because he's not a good defender anywhere. They've stuck him a lot of spots to see kind of where it'll work. And, ultimately he's going to end up at a corner and probably a first base DH type. But this team could certainly use this injection of Tyler Black, in my opinion, especially, given the situation at first base right now. I know Rhys Hoskins is DHing some and playing some first base, but Black could slide right into that role that Jake Bauers has. And I think that it's not crazy to speculate that he does come up this week, given just the timeline of everything, and that, it's a possibility that he does come up. So I'm not going to rule that out.
Now, Tyler Black is known obviously for speed primarily because he stole 55 bases last year across 2 levels of the minors. Him moving to first would seem to put more onus on the power. Do you believe that he's somebody who hits for enough power to be an interesting first base process? Is he like a guy that could go 20? Obviously, I was going to say 2020. He could steal way more bases than that. But do you see 20 homer upside from him as well?
I think in peak seasons, he certainly could. I'm not going to sit here and say that I believe that he's going to be a consistent 20 home run bat, but I think what makes him so unique is that he does steal bases. And at first base or at a corner spot, like that's notable. He doesn't hit the ball that hard. The EVs are, average to below average still, even with some
Mhm.
jumps last year. And so I'm not huge on the power. I know he has 5 this year and 117 plate appearances. So you look at it and say, oh, yeah, this guy's going to hit for power. The underlying stuff doesn't really support that as much. And again, I know he even hit for power last year. He hit 18
Right.
last year, but I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a guy that just always outperforms the EVs due to launch angles, etc. And those things happen. So I'm not going to say he can't hit 20, but I'd say 15 is probably more of an expectation for me. With some seasons getting to 20, but that speed is game changer at the corner spot.
Yeah, agreed. I did lie to you because we'll take one more hitter question just because it came in about his teammate, Jackson Chourio. Obviously, the 4 homers and the 4 steals is nice. The batting average is hovering around the Mendoza line. The strikeout rate is getting up there. The swinging strike rate is over 15% right now. The chase rate, his O swing is near 40%. It's at like 38. Are you concerned about Chourio? Obviously, they gave him money, and Garrett Mitchell is still hurt, so I don't think like he's in any danger of being demoted. But for let's talk about like redraft purposes first, because I think obviously in keeper and dynasty, you're holding on to Chourio because we know what his potential is. But in a redraft format, are you worried about what we're going to see?
No, I think that this was the expectation. And I think I even put out a poll preseason, something along the lines of if Chourio hit 230 and went 2020, would you be disappointed? And like 90% of people said they'd be disappointed. But we're talking about a player that just turned 20, that it showed high chase in the minors, that showed some struggles with breaking balls. I'm not a bit surprised by that. And, I think he's only going to improve. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is a situation where he's playing good defense too, which helps. He's looked really good in the field. He's providing value on the base paths. And I know there's been some struggles, but he's still barreling up the ball. He's showing things that you want to see. And honestly, I think that considering he just turned 20 in March, that
Right.
he's kind of meeting expectations for me right now. I know that's not popular. I know that obviously you want the instant production for fantasy purposes. For redraft, it all depends. I mean, I think he's going to go 2020 if he plays the rest of the year. And so, how valuable is that to you if he hits 230 rest of season or even 220 rest of season? I do think it's a case where he does get better throughout the year. I think that when you're so young, you get your first taste of major league pitching with having a pretty small sample in AAA at that, that you're going to go through some bumps in the road. And
Yeah.
so I'm not that concerned about Chourio. I think it's just all about the expectations. I think people probably had the expectation that he comes in the year, that he does go 2020, but maybe he hits 270 or maybe it's
Right.
even 25-25. You kind of, you name it. I think the expectations with these guys are just a little high, but I'd say look at the rest of the prospect performers that have come up. And I'd say Churio's holding his own just fine. And I think that he's here to stay. So it all depends on if you can stomach the batting average or not, which I think and thought would be low in his first year.
Yeah, I do. I like your point, that I do think like with Jackson Holiday, I think we just have a little bit of outlandish expectations for these guys who are really young, who didn't have a lot of minor league experience to come up and just immediately hit the ground running. We'll switch over to some pitcher questions to wrap up the final 10, 15 minutes on here. Kyle Bradish or Brian Wu, who do you trust more off the IL? These are both guys coming off elbow injuries, that did not have any sort of surgery done. Bradish scheduled tentatively to return this week to the rotation. Wu made his second rehab start, has still not yet mixed in breaking balls in the rehab start, so we might get one, maybe two more. My answer to this is that I trust Brian Wu more, and it's only because Brian Wu had elbow inflammation, and Kyle Bradish had a tear. And he rested and rehabbed the tear. And for me, like, it's important to just like caveat it right from the start. I'm just always going to trust the guy who's not pitching with a tear in his elbow, because I just don't know how long Kyle Bradish is going to be out there for. It's almost like every pitch could be the one that exacerbates the tear and ends the season. And that's nerve-wracking for me.
If we're looking at pure performance, I trust Bradish more. Just the track record is better long term. If you look starting in the second half of 2022, he changed some pitch mix.
Yeah.
He's had a sub-3 ERA since then, over 240 innings. I will say that you have to factor in the injuries here, though, because sadly, I hate to say it, but when a guy has a tear, it just seems pretty inevitable they get surgery. So whether it's now or later, we see a lot of guys try to pitch through it and work through it and just rehab on their own. It typically ends in surgery. And so I'm afraid that that's going to be the case here with Bradish. But if I'm just looking at pure performance, all things equal, it's Bradish. But health-wise, I got to go Wu.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. I noticed this too when I was looking at Yahoo's most dropped players. Among the most dropped pitchers in Yahoo formats was Christopher Sanchez of the Phillies. So Cole asks, what are your opinions on Christopher Sanchez? Seen him dumped in a couple leagues and trying to decide if he's worth a large fab bid. For me, yes. I like Christopher Sanchez. I mean, large is obviously a relative term. How much are you willing to spend? This is not a guy who is an ace, right? You're not picking up like a potential Jared Jones off the waiver wire. So I mean, large fab bid in the sense that I'm not trying to unload everything. However, this is a pitcher. He's a pitcher that I really trust. I think that right now he's getting hurt a little bit by a 350 BABIP. Which is well above his normal average. I don't particularly love, I was talking to Nick Pollock about this when we were doing on the Corner podcast, is I don't particularly love that like he was adding velocity to both his changeup and his sinker. I felt like it was just like his pitch mix kind of lined up perfectly with the way that his pitches worked off of one another. I will say that like my concerns are slightly unfounded. I mean, the swinging strike rate on the changeup is down a little bit, but it's not giving up more hard contact. I don't think it's really making a huge difference. I just think like this is a guy who, is a lot about command and a unique pitch mix, and so he really kind of needs to be fine and pinpoint with some things. And so there's going to be some stretches where he's not locating as well as he should, and he's going to get hit around a little bit. I understand that people don't like that it was against the Angels, but like, listen, he didn't command his changeup. He threw 15 changeups in that start. He threw 3 of them for strikes. That's his best pitch. When you're not throwing your best pitch for strikes, you're not going to have a good day. I don't believe that is the norm for Christopher Sanchez. So I'd be trying to add him in most like 12 team leagues or deeper if he's somehow on the wire.
Yeah, I agree. I guess he's getting dumped after his start against the Angels. He had 4 earned over 5 innings, but other than that, he's pitched pretty well all year. I know the strikeouts have kind of fluctuated start to start, where some starts he's had it, some starts he's not had the strikeouts. But at the end of the day, I think that strike throwing is a big deal. As you mentioned, the changeup obviously being his best pitch. Slider, I'd like to see him throw a little more. But yeah, I think he's a fine ad. I think you pick him back up. I mean, he was good last year. He showed all of last year that he was a solid arm. It's not like this was a pop-up guy this year that now all of a sudden is just good. He was good last year as well. Eric, I do want to stop you. Tyler Black just
we just got a chat in here that says Tyler Black officially being called up for MLB Pipeline. So that rumor is true. Yeah. Whoever that Canadian reporter was, I'm sorry that we don't have the question we got didn't mention the name, so we can't properly credit. So I guess we talked about him a little bit at length in his profile. So just your gut reaction. In what league types and league sizes would you be looking to add Tyler Black?
Assuming that he plays regularly, and you hate to even put it on that. Like, does he play regularly? We've seen obviously with Kjerstad come up and not play regularly. Assuming he does get the call, he's going to take at bats from Jake Bauers. Of course he should. I think that he should be probably added in 12-team leagues. Shallower than that, probably not, because I just think it's such a unique profile that Black does bring to the table. He has high contact. He is going to get you speed. And like we mentioned, I think he gets enough power to not hurt you from that corner spot, which I does think we're like a first base spot. You do need power. The launch angles are the kind of the king here. He's going to hit the ball at ideal launch angles. He's going to put more balls over the fence than the exit velocity suggests. I mean, he's got a sub 85 mile an hour average EV right now, which is not good. It's like bottom tier MLB caliber, but the barrel rate's still at 9.5% because he hits the ball at the ideal launch angles. He makes a ton of contact. He's going to walk at a high clip and be on base a lot to steal as well. So I think the uniqueness of the profile warrants an ad here, just given that at the corner spot, like he's going to give you some counting stats that you may not get elsewhere. I'm curious where he's eligible in like a Yahoo format, like without.
Right. So I'm looking that up right now. He is eligible second base, third base.
Yeah.
So
nice.
There's a chance in Yahoo formats he's first base, second base, third base eligible after X number of starts, which is intriguing. Also, I'm looking, I think in OBP and OPS formats, he gets a little bit of a boost because I know the walk rate is down a little bit this year, but he is he has run high walk rates. We are getting a comment in the chat, which I'll just throw up right here, that he's currently only third base eligible in ESPN leagues, which means there's an expectation he could be first base, third base. But like, let's throw some names out, right? I am currently looking at one of my Yahoo 12-team leagues, first base options that are on the wire. So guys who maybe you're starting, let's say you lost Tristan Casas. You need somebody to fill in that corner infield spot. You're looking at like a Ty France, Josh Bell, Nolan Shanuel, Joey Meneses. Like, these seem to be names. Oh, Matt Mervis. These seem to be names where like Tyler Black maybe is more intriguing to you than them, or do you think like the track record of a Josh Bell, the exit velocity increase of a Ty France is maybe a little more than what you're going to get from Tyler Black?
Well, I keep waiting for Ty France to do something. I know he's hit a couple over the last several days, but I've looked at those metrics all year and I'm like, hit some home runs, please, because 4 mile an hour jump in average EV and pretty good jump in barrel rates notable. But I think in general, I'd add him over most of those guys. France is kind of the interesting one, but like a Shanuel, people probably know that I'm just not a Nolan Shanuel fan at all, really. He's just a very odd profile at the corner for fantasy purposes, at least. Does not mean he won't be good for real life, but he just doesn't provide a lot for fantasy managers. I think that Matt Mervis, he's once been a guy that everybody thought would be a 30 home run bat, but the Cubs kind of never valued him in that way, which, was kind of telling to me that internally they just they weren't overly high on Matt Mervis's huge season. The good news is Mervis has been playing, but his MLB track record has not been good at all. I think there's some more swing and miss there than we want to admit with Mervis, because the AAA samples are good, but majors not so much. So I think given Black's contact skills, his very low chase rates, running at 22% chase rate right now, it's even lower last year. I think that gives him such a high floor to excel, which is why I'd look to add him just on that standpoint of that. Yes, he's going to get on base. He's going to steal you bags, and he makes a ton of contact, which for a prospect coming up, I feel a lot better about them if they have those traits, just be able to make contact and get on base.
I like that. This interrupted our pitching questions. I like this question because I want to point out a couple things. So the question is, rest of season, would you prefer Emerson Hancock, Spencer Turnbull, or Clark Schmidt? And I still, I know that we're a month into the season. I don't like looking at things, especially with pitchers, from a rest of season outlook. Unless, again, we're talking about like a prospect who's getting an opportunity and you're saying, okay, Kade Horton is up. Like, what is his rest of season outlook? Where does he stack up? I just think there's so much turmoil among arms. I think there is so much that fluctuates in terms of just like, hey, it doesn't seem like this guy's going to be in the rotation, Ronel Blanco. And then all of a sudden, he's remains in the rotation forever because of injuries and all this kind of stuff. So like, I really want to look at like, who do I want over the next 2 or 3 starts? And then I will recalibrate over the next 2 or 3 starts. So for me, the answer to this question, Emerson Hancock, Spencer Turnbull, or Clark Schmidt, is Spencer Turnbull, because Spencer Turnbull is clearly pitching the best of the 3. I know that the Phillies are like, oh, well, he might lose his rotation spot to Taijuan Walker, who was atrocious in his first start back. And so I don't right now, I'm not willing to believe that the Phillies are just going to take Turnbull out of the rotation unless he's A, starts pitching poorly, or B, Taijuan Walker pushes him out of the rotation. Neither one of which I believe is happening imminently. And so I think I'm going to get at least 2 more starts out of Spencer Turnbull, if not more. And so I would much rather just take those than say, oh, but he might not be in the rotation in 6 weeks, because I have no idea what any of these pitchers are going to be doing in 6 weeks. Also, if Brian Wu comes back, Emerson Hancock might not be in the rotation, right? So I don't know if you view things differently when it comes to, projecting pitchers out in the middle of the season.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't think you pull a guy like Turnbull out of the rotation on a contending team. It just doesn't make sense to do when he's pitching so well. And I mean, it could all come crashing down rather quickly. But at the end of the day, I mean, Turnbull has looked really impressive. I'm not in on Emerson Hancock at all. So I'm not, he's not really in the equation here for me. Schmidt's been good, but I think at the end of the day, just continue to roll the hot hand with Turnbull, and knowing if he does come out of the rotation, then you just churn the spot. But right now, he's looked really, really good so far. I mean, I didn't expect this, to be honest with you, that he would come back and pitch at these levels. But so far, so good with kind of a new sweeper. I think that's obviously been a big thing for him. That sweeper working, has a 33.3% whiff rate on it so far, which is very notable. Curveballs missing bats too. And the 4-seam is actually inducing a lot of weak contact with the sinker. He's got one of the lower average exit velocities in baseball right now. So when he's not missing bats, he's getting the ball on the ground and he's inducing a lot of weak contact. And so, I think when you look at Turnbull, that's my play, because he's been hot. He pitches on a contending team, and not that Schmidt doesn't, but he's in a better ballpark than Schmidt. And I just don't think they pull the plug on Turnbull yet with how he's pitching. With all the injuries, another injury could pop up in that Phillies rotation. We don't even have to worry about that. So I think it's too soon to kind of question that. I'd take Turnbull.
Agreed. We'll get out of here with 2 more quick prospect questions, since, I've got to ask you prospect questions when you're on here. When do you expect Woods? We're talking obviously about James Woods. We're talking about the Nationals outfielder, and it is James Wood. Not to correct, not that it matters, but if you're just like, looking things up on your Yahoo, I know that he's in AAA, which maybe has escalated the timeline. My initial thought was he was like a July, August guy, because the Nationals are not contending. I think they maybe want, as you mentioned with Kade Horton, him to be rookie of the year eligible for next year. Also, I think the purpose of signing guys like Jesse Winker, Joey Gallo, Eddie Rosario, whatever, is to try to get some value out of them, like to let them play for long enough that you could maybe flip them for some low-level prospect somewhere that might turn into something. I don't think you're signing Jesse Winker in the hopes that he is like the future in the outfield. So I think the expectation was to give those guys, those veterans, a couple months and then sell them off, bring up the prospects. But I don't know if you see things differently in terms of his timeline.
No, I would agree with you. I think that while it's not popular at all, they're not going to rush him. They don't really have a reason to. They kind of from the beginning have not planned to push him up. And while he has forced their hand a little bit, I will say, given his great spring, given the performance so far, there's still some struggles under the hood. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's struggling to make contact consistently in AAA. And I know you look at it and say, well, the numbers look good. He's still making a contact at just a 67.5% clip. which that's not going to fly well at the majors. And this is the type of guy that would likely come up and really struggle. Breaking balls, eat him up. Change-ups, eat him up. The data backs that. Whether you want to look on the surface and say, well, he's been good or not. And I know that this isn't a popular answer, but he's not going to be rushed. And I know that people say, well, Rizzo said that if he was, or if Lane Thomas was out a while, they consider him. What do you want the GM to say? You want the GM to come up and say,
right.
Hey,
he's not coming up.
Yeah, our best prospect that's killing it at AAA, there's zero chance for calling him up. He's not going to say that. You lose. That's how you lose the fan base. So I think the plan still would be an August call up unless something drastic happens. Because I do think there's still things to work on despite him hitting 330 and despite him only striking out 22% of the time. On the surface, looks really good. Hitting the ball hard, also pounding the ball into the ground. He's got a negative launch angle right now, 55% ground ball rate. So there are things that need to be worked on. There is a scouting report out on James Wood, and I think he still needs time. He's young. Yeah. He's 21 years old. So no, I don't think we see him up anytime soon. He's not a priority stash for me in redraft. I know you'll see that a lot of places, but I don't think that's the case here. And Lane Thomas will likely be back and be fine. So
I tend to agree with you.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with you there. And I also know that, like, I know the Nationals are 500 right now, but it's going to take way more time into the season before they're like, hey, we have a shot at making the playoffs. Maybe we want this bat in our lineup. Like, we need to be talking like 100 games into the season or something close where you're like, 90 games into the season where you're like, okay, we actually do have a shot. They're not making that call 28 games in. We're going to end with a closer question because Cow Chad is here all the time, and I want to make sure I get to this. He had a question just about like where we think the Cubs save situation ends up. Who do we think gets the most saves by the end of the season? Little, Alzolay, Neris, or Almonte? None. Realistically, I do think that Alzolay has a chance to get the job back. I guess Leiter Jr. also should be in that mix. I think that Alzolay has a shot to get the job back. He was pretty good in it last year. I think that he has the most upside of the group. So I think that the Cubs would like him to pitch his way back into the job. But it also wouldn't surprise me if we're talking about somebody who isn't currently on the roster who like leads the Cubs in saves over the second half of the year. Like, for example, like Kenley Jansen. Right, we know the Red Sox were shopping Kenley Jansen all offseason. They are currently in contention right now, but it's tough with all their injuries to assume the Red Sox are going to be actually battling for a playoff spot. He's in the last year of his contract. He makes sense as a second half rental. If the Cubs haven't had anybody emerge by then, why not? Like, why not try and go and get somebody like that? So I understand claiming Hector Neris, go for it. I would still be trying to hold Alzolay where I could because I think he has a shot to get back there. But it wouldn't surprise me if there's another name who emerges in here later on.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I wouldn't be shocked to see them trade for a closer. Neris has obviously gotten the last 4 saves, but it hasn't been without some shakiness.
Yeah, I mean,
the last 2 outings walked 2 batters each outing. The outing before, he allowed a home run. So they haven't necessarily been clean saves by any means. And so it could come crumbling down. We're looking at a FIP over 2 runs higher than the ERA, which is a little bit concerning to me. He's walking a ton of batters. So Alzolay could earn it back. I think that he's the most talented one in that bullpen for sure. We'll see how it all shakes out. I think you're right. I think Kenley Jansen type could be a really good fit on this team.
We'll see. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Chris, thanks again for joining us. Just let everybody know before we get out of here, there's still a lot of people in the chat, where they can find your work and how they can reach you on Twitter and all that.
Yeah, of course. So again, appreciate you having me. A great time today chatting with the audience and you. But yeah, on Twitter at RotoClegg, CLEGG. All my work's at thedynastydugout.com and rotoballer.com as well. So find it all there. Dynasty prospects, redraft, got you all covered.
Yeah, and you can follow me on Twitter at SamskiNYC. You can read all my stuff at NBCSports.com. Tomorrow, Wednesday morning, as every Wednesday, is my mixing it up, looking at pitch mix changes. It'll be Kevin Gossman, Dylan Cease, Ben Lively, and Simeon Woods Richardson. So we're digging into some good names, some young names. So take a look at that. And obviously Rotoworld fantasy baseball podcast coming out tomorrow morning, where we look at the Yahoo Friends and Family draft from last night, where Elly De La Cruz was a top 5 pick. What? Would you do it? Should you do it? We'll talk about that on the podcast. So thanks to Chris, and we'll see everybody later.